Hello, Internet. So before I get into the actual video, I would like to ask a question. What would you guys like to talk about? See, the whole intent of this video series was to bring up topics for discussion, to actually get some communication going on, some exchange of ideas, and, well, there's been some results in that vein, but I get the feeling that I'm just not talking about the things that you guys want to hear about. So what do you want to talk about? Just leave it down in the comments. And so, welcome to the Empirical Sword. I'm Lore Master DLC79. I'm an INTJ. I'm a gamer, and I talk about things, and in this case, I'm going to talk about something a little controversial, especially in the light of recent newsworthy events. Are video games too violent? It seems like any time some sort of violent crime happens in the news, the finger starts getting pointed at video games. They're too violent. They're murder simulators, and they're desensitizing the youth to the effects of violence. And well, let's. In typical INTJ fashion, I want to step back and look at the big picture. I mean, yes, a lot of games are pretty violent, and they do center around violent activities. But when we blame video games for certain acts, certain violent acts, I'm trying to steer clear of any specifics, because I don't want to be accused of trying to cash in on someone's tragedy just to get views, because I'm not doing that, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to steer clear of any specific mention of any incidents in the real world, and try to keep this as high level and strategic as possible. But when we accuse games of being too violent, we're essentially accusing all video games of being too violent. And I don't see how that's a rational argument. I mean, yes, there are games that almost definitely sensationalize and almost glorify certain degrees of violence. But then we have games like Pokemon Go. I wouldn't exactly say that's the same kind of violence, if we can even call it violence. And then we have puzzle solving games like Factorio, and there are others that I can't think of off the top of my head. I should know them because I've actually done research into them to see if I would want to play them on this channel. And Factorio, no. Too much logistics for me. But will we call that violent? No. And actually, I wouldn't even call it a puzzle-solving game. It's essentially a logistics production line, factory building game. But violent. I mean, as far as the topic of this video goes, no, it's not violent at all. So can we say that when we ask the question, are video games too violent, we have to be more specific than that. Are some video games too violent? Maybe. And this here comes down to a little more nuance. Too violent compared to what? I mean, let's look at movies and television and novels, cartoons, comic books, comic strips, music. I mean, there's some music that I would definitely classify as being relatively violent. So are video games too violent as compared to these other media? Or are we saying that some video games are too violent for some people's taste? And that's fine. I mean, everybody's entitled to have their own taste. If you think a video game is too violent, okay, you have an opinion. Um, and you're keeping this as strategic as possible. You know, there have actually been studies into whether or not video game violence can be related to real world violence, and I mean, there's nobody's, as far as I know, nobody's come to any definitive conclusion, which probably means that there's actually no correlation, and any correlation that we have is mere coincidence, or any semblance of a correlation we have is mere coincidence. But overall, it's I don't think we can just blame video games for violent behavior, because I mean, violence has just become such a pervasive part of modern day culture. I mean, we see it on the news. In fact, I mean, over the past few months, I've caught glimpses of news reports, and I mean, some of the stuff they show on the 6 o'clock news is pretty graphic. I mean, I don't see how they can get away with that. I mean, that, I would say, is cashing in on other people's tragedy to get views, or ratings, as they're called in the news industry. Translation, people show up and we show them ads, which is how we fill our pockets with money. I would call that a little unethical. But I have an opinion, and you know, who cares about that? On the other kind of sub topic of this entire like accusation, do video games condition us to be less sensitive to violence or the effects of violence? And I have to say no, because I mean, mashing buttons in Street Fighter is not the same as punching somebody in the face for real. And I mean, as for video games that display like very graphic portrayals of, you know, gore and, you know, things like that, does that desensitize a person from actually seeing the actual results of that in real life? I would have to say that if somebody sees the results of actual real-world violence and they're not emotionally moved at all, regardless of their exposure to video games and video game violence, there was probably something wrong with that person to begin with, to not have an emotional response to that. Could video games have like added to the desensitization? Maybe. We have to think big picture here. It's too easy to blame one thing for all of society's problems. And the truth is, regardless of what the problem is, in the real world, a single problem usually has multiple causes. And just attacking one, or accusing one, or trying to fix one of those causes, it doesn't really address the entire problem. It addresses one cause out of many. So, I mean, one thing that I think is a very powerful argument against, against the notion that video games promote or encourage or glamorize violence. Look at human history. We've been on this planet for like 10,000 years, give or take. Or at least we've been recording history for, well, actually, we've been recording history for like 5,000 years. I think there's like 5,000 years of that, of unrecorded history, or something like that. It's a big number, a lot of years. How long have video games been around? About 3 decades. Well, no. Showed up in the 70s. 80, okay, four decades? No, I'm not that old, am I? Am I? Wow. But it's like, let's see, 10%, 1%, 0.1, less than 0.1% of human history has had video games. And even then, the early days of video games, they were like novelties that nobody really cared about, except for the people who really cared about them, which didn't make up a lot of people. But throughout the entire 10,000 years of human history, we've been killing each other and inventing new and more elaborate ways of causing harm to other human beings, sometimes on mass scales. So one of the quotes that I saw somewhere on the internet, I can't even remember where now, is, what video game do we blame World War II on, or something like that. We didn't have video games back then, yet there were mass graves and incineration. We can't just blame video games for violence. Now, are video games getting to a point where they kind of glamorize violence? Well, I think pretty much all of modern media, movies, television, music, are getting to a point where we're glamorizing and sensationalizing violence of some form or another. I mean, not just, I didn't see Justice League. Dawn of Justice, the one before it. When I saw that, I kind of stepped away from the whole DC cinematic universe, because it's but another thing that kind of dawned on me when watching that movie is that superhero movies have become basically action movies, and action movies are simply just 2 to 3 hour long violent simulators now. And I don't want to watch that, but several billion people on planet Earth disagree with me. They do want to watch that. And I think part of it is coming down to, again, what I call psychopathic business philosophy. If they're buying or selling, this is what people want to buy, so movies, television, this is what they're making, and they're flooding the market with it because they're trying to keep up with the demand. And this is what our culture is becoming. So is it just video games? No, I don't think it is. And personally, I do think that media in general is moving more and more toward violence sensationalizing. There's probably a better way of saying that, but I didn't think of it in time to actually say it. And now it's on video, so I can't just edit it out. I could, but I'm lazy. But I mean, the point is, I don't think we can blame violent crimes on video games specifically. I think it's more of a cultural phenomenon that we're kind of getting to a point in society that society at large is glorifying violent behavior. And I think that right there is the major impetus behind violent crime, is that people are emulating what they're seeing. And what they're seeing is essentially art imitating life, because human history has been very violent. We are a very violent species. So art imitates life, but then life imitates art. So if our art is very violent, then people are going to emulate that and become violent themselves. More often than not. I mean, obviously there are people who can sit and watch a 2 to 3 hour violence simulator or action movie, as they're called in the mainstream, and then they can walk away and feel absolutely no violent tendencies whatsoever. I don't think I'm that kind of person, because I mean, yeah, I have thoughts just like anybody else. I don't act on them, but I mean, I do think it's society at large that kind of the blame, or where the blame should be placed is, and to be honest, I don't know how to fix that. At least not quickly. And that's. I mean, really, it has to come down to mindset. I mean, changing the minds of billions of people, or changing the outlook and the perspectives and of billions of people. I mean, how do you do that? I know, just spread the message and then hope it goes viral. And the problem is, this is the sort of thing that doesn't go viral. Hey, exercise a little self-discipline. Hey, life isn't as bad as you think. These messages, they don't go viral. I mean, among very small niches, they go viral, but not usually among the people who need to hear the message. And if you can't tell, this is the kind of the whole mission behind the Empirical Sword is to spread a message that we need to take our education into our own hands, and that we need to be responsible for our own self-education, because the system, that's not doing it for us. And I want to get this message out to gamers, because I believe the gamers can actually benefit from this. And if you enjoy oh, by the way, thank you for watching. I need to say that in every single video. Thank you for watching, because you really don't have to spend time watching these videos, but you do. And I thank you for that. If you want to see more, subscribe and bell icon. And I completely forgot. I rushed ahead and forgot to promote the School Doesn't Teach series, which is probably over here in the right corner. We're talking about the things the school should be teaching but isn't. But yeah, subscribe and bell icon. And whatever you're watching next, I will see you then.